want to say up front that I'm not the kind of person who scares easy. I was 34 that summer, working as an insurance adjuster out of a small office in western Kentucky, and most of my job was standing in flooded basements, writing numbers on a clipboard. Nothing about my life had prepared me for what happened on Lake Corliss on the last Saturday of July, 1997. I'd been going to that lake since I was a kid. My father used to take me out in his aluminum John boat before he passed, and after he passed away, I kept the boat and kept the habit. Most weekends I'd load up my truck, an old Ford with a cassette player that only worked if you smacked the dashboard, and drive the 40 minutes out to the Corliss Marina. I'd buy my fishing license from the same laminated form at the bait shop counter every year, fill my thermos, and head out alone. That Saturday, I launched around 6 in the evening. The marina owner, a heavyset man named Dale who'd run the place since before I was born, told me the weather radio was calling for fog after dark. I told him I'd be back before it got bad. I was wrong about that. Before I launched, an old-timer named Wendell was sitting on the dock in a folding lake chair, working through a bag of boiled peanuts. Wendell had fished Corliss longer than Dale had owned the marina, and he liked to talk. He told me that a couple years back, another fisherman had come in one foggy night swearing somebody had followed him halfway across the lake in a boat with no running lights, calling out to him by a name that wasn't his. Wendell laughed when he told it, said the man had probably had one too many from his cooler. I laughed along with him and didn't think much of it again until I was out on the water myself. By 7:30, the light was going gray and soft, and by 8, the fog had come up off the water so thick I could barely see the bow of my own boat. I wasn't panicked. I'd been caught in fog on that lake before. I had a compass clipped inside my tackle box, and I had a paper map of Corliss folded up under the bench seat, the creases gone soft from years of handling. I cut my outboard motor down to an idle and started working my way toward what I believed was the marina channel. I had a little FM weather radio clipped to my belt too, the kind that ran on a 9-volt battery and hissed if you got too far from the antenna. I switched it on to catch the marine forecast, and instead of a clear voice, I got nothing but a low, steady static, broken every so often by something that almost sounded like a person talking underneath it. I couldn't make out a single word. I turned it off and figured the batteries were going. That's when I heard the first thing that didn't sit right with me. Somewhere off to my left, out in the gray, I heard knocking, not tapping, knocking, slow and deliberate, like knuckles on a hollow hull. 3 knocks, then nothing. I called out, asked if somebody was there. No answer came back. I told myself it was a loose cleat banging against a hull somewhere, carried strange through the fog the way sound does over water. I kept moving. 10 minutes later, I found a life jacket floating by itself, orange and faded, tangled in a mat of lily pads near the old channel marker. There was no boat near it, no person swimming, just the jacket bobbing there with the buckles still fastened, like somebody had slipped clean out of it. I picked it up out of instinct more than anything and set it on the bench beside me. My hands were a little unsteady by then, though I wouldn't have admitted that to anybody at the time. Then I heard the motor. It was a small outboard, the kind you'd find on an old John boat like mine, and it was running without any lights. I could hear it idling somewhere behind me, matching my speed whenever I moved, going quiet whenever I stopped. I called out twice. The second time, a voice answered from inside the fog, close enough that it made the hair stand up on my arms. "Got a rope on you?" My motor shot. I couldn't see him yet, just the shape of a low aluminum boat sliding closer through the gray, running dark. When he finally came alongside, I saw a man maybe 10 years older than me, wearing a canvas coat too heavy for July, with a flashlight in his lap that he never once turned on. His eyes went to the bench beside me for just a second, to the orange life jacket lying there, and something crossed his face before he caught it. It wasn't surprise. It was closer to the look a man gets when something he thought he'd lost track of turns up in front of him. Then it was gone, and he was just a stranded fisherman again. He said his name was Roy. He said his engine had died an hour back, and he'd been drifting ever since. I didn't like the look of him, but I wasn't about to leave a man stranded on a lake in the fog. I tied a length of rope between our boats and told him I'd tow him toward the marina channel. He didn't want to go to the marina. He said it easy at first, like it was no big thing. Said there was a cove closer, a place called Cut Bank on the south shore, where he had a camp and could get warm and figure out his motor in the morning. I told him the marina had a payphone and dry dock hands, and Dale would help him get a mechanic in the morning too. He got quiet after that, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone flatter. "Marina's the wrong way tonight," he said. "I want to be honest and say that's the moment I first felt something was truly wrong, not just strange. A man who doesn't know which way is home wouldn't argue so hard about which way was wrong. I checked my compass. According to it, the marina was northeast. Roy kept saying it was south, kept saying it with more edge in his voice each time, like he needed me to believe him more than I needed to be right. Then his flashlight came on by accident. He must have bumped it, and for just a second, I saw the bottom of his boat. Sitting in it, half covered by a tarp, were 3 metal drums, the kind you'd see stacked behind an auto shop, with warning labels I couldn't read at that distance but could guess well enough at. He flicked the light off fast. Neither of us said anything about it, but something in me went cold and clear all at once, the way it does when your body understands a thing before your mind catches up. I untied the rope. He shouted for me to wait, that he still needed the tow, but I'd already thrown my throttle forward, and my little outboard kicked us away from him into the fog. Behind me, I heard his motor cough, catch, and roar to life. A motor that had supposedly been dead for an hour. He came after me. I'm not going to pretend I handled the next 20 minutes with any kind of skill. I ran that lake blind, going on nothing but memory and the compass bouncing on the dash of my boat, and the whole time I could hear his engine somewhere behind me, sometimes close, sometimes falling back, never gone. Twice I cut my own motor and drifted silent, hoping he'd pass me by in the fog, and both times I heard his engine slow down exactly when mine did, like he was listening for me the same way I was listening for him. The second time I did that, I heard him call out into the fog, not to me, but like he was talking to someone else on his radio. I only caught pieces of it. Something about he saw the drums. Something about handle it before the marina. That was when I understood this wasn't a man stranded by bad luck. This was a man protecting something, and I had become a problem he needed to solve. At one point, I passed close enough to something solid that I nearly ran into it before I saw it. An old wooden dock, half collapsed, jutting out from a shoreline I didn't recognize. I cut my motor and drifted alongside it, just long enough to see fresh mud tracked across the boards, boot prints, still wet, leading up toward the tree line, and not one leading back. Whoever had made them hadn't come back down to a boat. I didn't wait around to think about where they'd gone. I found the old channel marker again by accident, a leaning wooden post with a rusted number plate that I recognized from 100 trips with my father, and I used it to get my bearing. From there, I knew the shoreline curved toward a stretch of marsh grass and a derelict boathouse that hadn't been used in years, ever since the family that owned that stretch of shore sold off their land. I steered for it, not because I had a plan, but because I knew the reeds there were too shallow and too thick for a boat with a bigger engine to follow easily. I was right about that. I felt my hull scrape bottom and I cut the engine, letting the boat glide the last stretch into the reeds by momentum alone. Behind me, Roy's motor throttled down, searching, sweeping one direction and then another, close enough now that I could hear him breathing hard between the idle. I sat there in the dark and the fog with my father's boat under me and that stranger's abandoned life jacket still sitting on the bench beside my knee, and I did not move for what felt like an hour, though my watch later told me it had only been about 20 minutes. Somewhere out past the reeds, I heard the old boathouse. Not saw it, heard it. A door on rusted hinges, swinging in wind that wasn't blowing anywhere else. And under that sound, so faint I told myself for years afterward that I might have imagined it, I heard someone else out there. Not Roy. A second voice, low, saying something I couldn't make out from the direction of that boathouse. Roy's engine finally faded off to the west, toward Cutbank Cove, and didn't come back. I waited another 20 minutes in that marsh before I dared start my own motor again, and I ran it at a crawl the whole way back to the marina, following the shoreline by hand rather than trust the fog for one more turn. Dale was still at the dock when I came in, worried because I was 2 hours later than I told him. I told him everything, standing there dripping and shaking a little in the floodlight over the gas pumps. He didn't laugh at me. He got quiet instead, and he told me that stretch of shore by Cutbank Cove had a reputation nobody talked about much. 2 summers before, a county water sample had come back strange from that end of the lake, high enough in something chemical that the health department had come out and taken more samples, then never said another word publicly about what they found. I went to the sheriff's office the following Monday. A deputy took my statement and wrote down what I remembered about Roy, the drums, the second voice at the boathouse. He told me they'd look into it. 3 weeks later, I called back and was told the boathouse land was owned by a shell company out of a P.O. box in Nashville, and that nobody by the name of Roy could be tied to any registration on the lake. I stopped by the bait shop the following weekend and asked the woman behind the counter, a heavy-set lady named Carol who'd worked there longer than I'd been alive, if she remembered selling gas or bait to a man matching Roy's description. She flipped back through the handwritten marina logbook, the same ledger every boater signed when they filled up on fuel, and she found one entry from that Saturday evening with no name filled in at all, just a boat registration number that didn't match anything the county had on file. She said that happened sometimes when men paid cash and didn't want to be bothered writing it all out, but she admitted she'd never seen a blank line quite like that one before, and she'd worked that counter a long time. I kept coming back to what Wendell had told me on the dock before I ever launched that evening, about the fisherman who swore somebody had trailed him through the fog, calling him by the wrong name. At the time, it had sounded like a story men tell to pass an evening. I don't think that anymore. I think Roy came alongside that other boat the same way he came alongside mine, and I think the name was never a mistake. I think it was a test, a way of finding out who he'd caught before he decided which way to send them. Say the wrong name back, or no name at all, and maybe you got waved off toward the marina like nothing had happened. Recognize it, or hesitate the way a guilty man might, and maybe you got steered toward Cutbank instead. I don't know how many boats got stopped that way over the years, or how many of them made it back to a dock afterward. I never found the life jacket's owner. I gave it to Dale and he kept it hung on a nail behind the bait shop counter for years in case somebody ever came asking. Nobody ever did. I stopped fishing Corliss after that summer. Dale told me, years later, that a retired game warden mentioned finding a handful of rusted drums buried in the mud near Cutbank Cove during a drought that dropped the water level low. But by then there was nothing left to trace them to anybody, and no one still working for the county remembered the case well enough to reopen it. The one thing that stayed with me isn't the fog, or the boat, or even Roy's voice telling someone to handle it before the marina. It's that second voice at the boathouse, the one I only heard for a second and never could place. I've never been able to decide if it belonged to somebody who was waiting for Roy or somebody who was waiting for me.